Good morning, everybody. If I can have everyone's attention, that would be awesome. Thanks, everybody, for coming out to one of those rare Friday convo opportunities, and I think that you guys are going to love this one. As you know, I'm Professor Helt. I run the Security and Intelligence Studies program here at King, and we are absolutely delighted to welcome Mr. Christopher Burgess here today to speak to all of us. He'll also be in one of my classes right after this. Mr. Burgess served more than 30 years in the CIA in every single directorate in the agency, so he has done it all. When he left, he was awarded the Distinguished Career Intelligence Medal, which is basically the highest honor the CIA can convey. He is an award-winning writer, speaker, and commentator on all sorts of security issues. He hosts a video cast called Conversations from the Inside and another called Classic Chronicles Insights on National Security. He's a former senior security advisor to Cisco. He's been a CEO and COO with various startups in the data and security spaces as well. He does some freelance writing, and his byline appears everywhere in all sorts of security publications. And some news media publications as well. He's co-authored a book entitled Secrets Stolen, Fortunes Lost, Preventing Intellectual Property Theft and Economic Espionage in the 21st Century, and is currently writing with his co-author, The Trusted and Valued Insider. I will shut up now and introduce and give the floor to Mr. Christopher Burgess. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I want to know who that man is. Good morning. I watched all of you come in, and it is so delightful to see a group of folks who actually like each other. And you could feel the joy of your relationships as you all sat down and talked about all the things that were unimportant in life but important in your life. And so I so appreciated that. Professor Helt, to the faculty and students of King University, thank you for this gracious invitation to be with you. It's an honor to be in your company. It truly is. I've heard so much about the Christian-rooted mission of this institution, a mission cultivated with ethical citizens called to serve. A mission that resonates deeply with me. The honor to stand in a chapel where reflection and moral deliberation have long been practiced, a hallowed space for centuries. Men and women have come to discuss the many ethical dilemmas of life. The questions of right and wrong, truth and trust have been debated and reflected upon in such spaces for generations. That tradition matters. It gives this conversation its proper frame. Today, we won't just be talking about intelligence methods and tradecraft. That's fun, it's sexy, but that's not what I'm here for. Today, we will be talking about vocation and character. A word about me briefly to provide perspective. Professor Helt told you about my very brief professional diagram, but let's dig in a little more. My parents were activists, deep in the civil rights movement of the 1950s and beyond, just next door in Virginia. My father was a labor unionist, a leader within the Amalgamated Transit Union. My mother, a woman with a backbone of steel and a heart of gold. During the Second World War, she welded the sights on the M1 at Springfield Armory up in Massachusetts. My father was in the Army Air Corps. After the war, she focused on raising a family and making life better for all. In the late 1950s, I remember being shepherded to safety within our home with my younger sister by two of my elder brothers. My eldest brother stood with my parents standing behind their closed front door as a mob formed in our front yard. That home is, ironically, just 2 miles from what was soon to be the CIA headquarters. The people in the front yard were dressed in their white robes and hoods. That night, they burned a cross in our yard. They wished to silence my parents and their good work, and they failed. My father subsequently joined USAID. President Kennedy invited him. Who turns down the president? My father didn't. My mother was chagrined. This took us abroad. My mother wasn't quite sure, do I want to go abroad? But that we did. And so for the rest of my school years, I lived abroad. My parents characterized those years as helping people help themselves. Those years were also quite an adventure for their children. As the 5 of us became adults, my 3 older brothers all found their way to the Foreign Service and Peace Corps. My younger sister, well, she's a Methodist minister. Yes, tending her flock next door in Virginia. She's up at Mount Vernon Farms, chasing the ghost of Washington, I'm sure. For me, I was the black sheep of the family. I landed in the intelligence world. I literally grew up in the CIA. I entered at the lowest possible entry point, a file clerk. My qualifications, I knew A to Z and 0 to 9. I had a 98.6 pulse, or temperature. I had a pulse, I was ambulatory, and I could hold files in my hand. I also had a high school diploma. I popped out at the other end after having been station chief and other positions within the various directorates. And when it was all said and done, I was there 30 plus years, and I had done something in every directorate, had fulfilled every one of my life dreams, and I was so young I didn't know what to do. But I knew I had done it all. The agency, and for that matter, the intelligence community as a whole, has a public history of ethical and moral failures. They also have a non-public history of extraordinary successes. This dichotomy is not so unusual, as some secrets should remain secret and successes need not be trumpeted. As I stand before you, I feel it's most fitting that we're here together in this chapel to discuss balancing secrecy and morality and the ethical dilemmas in intelligence. Some 20 years ago, yes, the math will confirm I'm as old as I look, I left operational life and entered the corporate world, then took up a pen and public purpose to educate and enlighten, to demystify the world often shrouded in secrecy, to share the lessons I've learned in the hope of making your world a bit more transparent. I've learned that if my goal is to equip others with the tools to navigate the ethical complexities of the modern world, whether they're in the halls of government or in the boardrooms of a Fortune 500 company, that's not such a bad thing. I strongly believe the insights I have gained are not meant to be hoarded, but to be shared in the spirit of a continued mission. I'm proud of my history in the world of intelligence. For decades, I worked undercover, in the shadows, multiple aliases, multiple personas. I was a witness to the profound complexities of international relations, a participant in a world where the lines between right and wrong are rarely as clear as we might hope. My work has taken me across continents, through conflicts, and into quiet rooms where the fates of nations have been decided. It was a life of purpose, and one I would not trade for anything. And it's important to know, not only for myself, but for others, that that was then and this is now. I have now chosen a different path, a different way to serve. Today we'll reflect on a single persistent tension: secrecy and trust. In the intelligence community, we deal with secrets, and the very act of intelligence collection often hinges on the breaking of trust. It's an act of necessity. This presents for many looking to a career in the intelligence world an ethical and moral dilemma. Yet for all its complexity, the intelligence profession is also built on a foundation of trust among its practitioners. It's a paradox we live with daily. Intelligence exists because the world is dangerous. It exists to prevent harm, to steward safety, and to inform difficult decisions. But the act of gathering and handling secret information is also a test of moral character. It asks us whether we will use knowledge to protect the public good or whether we will bend it for private or partisan aims. Let's talk about secrets, about morality, about the profound responsibility that comes with knowing the truth. Today I want to walk through the profession's moral compass, the concrete ethical dilemmas we face in a digital age, the human cost when truth is weaponized, the advantages of collaboration over coercion, and the practical steps we can take, both institutionally and individually, to repair trust. I will close with a charge. Everyone in this room can be a truth keeper, and stewardship of truth is the work of a lifetime. Intelligence is a paradox. It requires acts that break ordinary kinds of trust, deception, secrecy, selective disclosure, yet it relies on the internal culture of integrity and external networks of trust. The professional ethic of intelligence is not simply to get the answer. It is get the answer reliably, transparently, within the intel community and honestly to those who decide. That last phrase is really important. The final audience for intelligence is the decision makers. But the true duty is to the country and to the people who rely on institutions to do the hard work of knowing. It is important to realize that the CIA and the other entities which comprise the intelligence community are support organizations. They are not the policymakers. They're the information gatherers and the information presenters. Consider a phrase commonly attributed to Henry Stimson. A gentleman does not read another gentleman's mail. Whether apocryphal or accurate, it captures a vital tension. Intelligence tools can be used for noble ends or coercive ones. Niccolo Machiavelli, one of my favorites, wrote in The Prince, "He who is not a friend to the prince is not to be trusted." It's pragmatic if cynical, a view of trust rooted in political utility. And then we contrast that with the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who wrote, "Trust men and they will be true to you. Treat them greatly and they will show you themselves great." This is a view of trust as an act of faith, something that when given freely inspires loyalty and integrity. The very act of intelligence requires us to navigate between those two poles. We must understand that trust can be a weapon, a shield, or a very foundation of an unbreakable partnership. And in my work in places like India and Russia and elsewhere, I learned this firsthand. In India, an individual in Delhi, many, many moons ago, with whom we had a long-standing trusted relationship, once shared a critical piece of information and prevented a major security incident. It wasn't through coercion or manipulation, but through a genuine human bond built over time. In our world, we learned to look at every act of trust through a critical lens. But we also learned that ultimately our mission was to build that trust. Trust within our own ranks, trust with who we engage, so we work together toward a common goal. Machiavelli and Emerson point us to the same tension from different directions: power and trust, necessity and moral habit. Our role is to keep that compass calibrated toward the public good. Think about this. In Delhi, that individual partner had no institutional obligation to help, nevertheless showed up sharing a single piece of information that prevented a catastrophe. That insight came from years of small acts of care, showing up, listening, reciprocating where possible, rather than any shortcut. In another theater, we all watched, a tidy political narrative constructed out of messy facts until the analyst's appropriate hedging doubts were edited away. That altered analyst precipitated the wrong yet desired policy outcome. Those two moments, one constructive, one coercive, exposed the stakes. One prevented a war, the other created the rationale to go to war. Intelligence is stewardship. The core of my philosophy is that intelligence is not about hoarding secrets, it's about stewarding safety. When we focus on the stewardship of safety and security, we shift our perspective from one focused on pure data collection to one of moral obligation. That is the critical distinction. Stewardship means that we must think on how individuals can do the most good toward the mission, rather than how we can prevent them from doing the most damage. This is the positive counterpoint point to a culture of fear-based society or security. It recognizes that in a system built on trust and empowerment, individuals are more likely to align their actions with the core mission values. In our work, we empowered the good to prevent the bad from morphing. We focused on cultivating a culture of integrity and a shared purpose that made acts of betrayal and misbehavior less likely. When stewardship is the guiding norm, secrecy becomes an instrument of protection, not a sword for partisan advantage. The challenge of stewardship is now compounded by new frontier, technology. Okay, maybe not so new. I did, after all, see the beginning of the internet and the arrival of color TV. So it's been around for a while, and I digressed. The digital age has blurred the lines between public and private, the seen and the unseen. We live in a world filled with more data than ever before. And with it comes a host of new ethical dilemmas. Consider the ethical considerations related to surveillance and data privacy. What is the line between protecting a nation and invading a citizen's privacy? Where does the responsibility lie when a technology created for one purpose is used for another? You would think in the year 2025, we'd have this settled and wrapped in a bow. Yet as a society, we still grapple with these questions. But it's not just technology that presents a danger. Man himself, for his own selfish reasons, can manipulate the very capabilities of intelligence to advance private viewpoints. We don't have to look that far back to see intelligence manipulated and horrifying decisions made because of it. It's a betrayal of the mission and a profound failure of ethics. The technological leaps of recent decades have multiplied both the capability and the temptation to misuse information. I'll highlight several concrete dilemmas, each of which could be the subject of a very long lecture on their own. But my aim is to make these ethical stakes vivid and the remedies practical. So bear with me. First up, systemic surveillance and mission creep. Think of this as the creation of programs born for narrowly defined security purposes, which then metastasize into permanent platforms for mass collection. Who saw that coming? Once you normalize broad collection, it chills dissent, disproportionately burdens marginalized communities. The fix is not purely technical. It's institutional. Sunset clauses, independent audits, clear statutory thresholds that require legislative, not administrative approval for major expansions. Next up, targeted influence, disinformation, and plausible deniability. The tools of state actors, and yes, others. You see, state actors seed tailored falsehoods across social platforms and then claim plausible deniability when exposed. Short-term tactical gains are seductive, but the long-term cost is strategic. Erosion of public trust and the normalization of reciprocal tactics by rivals. We need norms. We need verification mechanisms and consequences that make weaponized influence strategically unattractive. It's as if disinformation and misinformation have been allowed to embrace the Bristol Motor Speedway adage, all gas, no brakes, as lies and falsehoods careen around the world at breakneck speed. Then we have the use of cherry-picked intelligence and manufactured certainties. I've seen assessments reworked into politically congenial narratives, hedges removed, probabilities tightened, inconvenient caveats suppressed. The danger is not only wrong policy, it's the loss of credibility that follows. Structural remedies include protect dissent channels, formal analytic review boards insulated from political editing, explicit public acknowledgement of uncertainty when appropriate. Perhaps I'm too hopeful. But the moral compromise surrounding the state use of rendition, secret detention, and abusive interrogation with this country embracing the war on terror is one of these issues. When legal protections are suspended in the name of urgency, the cost is not merely moral, it's operational. Abusive practices produce unreliable intelligence and destroy the moral authority that enables cooperation. Yes, Look at the pivot the country took when we rightly declared a global war on terror. And then the Department of Justice manufactured a rationale and strategy which permitted the use of torture by the United States and the creation of black or covert prisons outside the United States, and then the unending extrajudicial holding of individuals in places like Guantanamo. They manufactured that. The question was asked, was it necessary, moral, or ethical? To all those questions, I say a definitive no. That's not the same thing as saying we should not have had a war on terror. We absolutely should have. It's what we did afterwards. When intelligence or intelligence collection is used to justify acts of cruelty, it ceases to be a tool for safety and becomes an instrument of barbarism. We must have codified red lines, independent oversight bodies, and routine public reporting on compliance to restore both morality and effectiveness. Now let's talk about coercion or collaboration. It's one of my favorite topics. Coerced sources will provide you information. Our adversaries use coercion as a tool. Hollywood embraces these storylines. The reality is information obtained under duress or extreme economic leverage is often worthless or actively misleading. The individual or entity is focused on one thing: making the pain stop. The conduct of human intelligence, or HUMINT, through recruited assets means that one must demand ethical collaboration, documenting source conditions, and training of intelligence officers in the ethics of human collection. An intelligence system that tolerates coerced collection or testimony sacrifices both truth and justice. Let's jump into artificial intelligence and algorithmic assertiveness, the opaque truth claims. As Gail mentioned, I was the chief operating officer in a startup about 15 years ago, a big data company. We were working with AI and machine learning then. It's not something new. It's been around for years and years and years. Machine learning systems can produce striking outputs. They are truly powerful beasts, but they can also be encoded with choices and biases. Within the intelligence rubric, we must resist viewing presenting algorithmic score as an objective fact, as it removes contestability and harms people. We should insist on human-in-the-loop standards, model documentation, and guaranteed rights of explanation for affected individuals. We don't need to be building a system with confirmatory bias built in as a feature. I will be the first to admit the intelligence world is strange. I stand before you as an odd fellow. We collect information, yet many resist sharing information. They forget that the information collected was done in support of the nation, those who must make decisions, the policymakers. It's as if the information in that Mosler safe has more value than the information where it can be used. This mindset leads to strategic withholding, selective disclosure, and paternalistic secrecy. The deliberate suppressing of material facts for political cushioning corrodes democratic deliberation and public safety. If withholding is necessary, there must be a documented rationale, statutory timelines for disclosure, and independent review to prevent abuse. The adage, knowledge is power, is alive and well. As we see the concepts of reciprocity, escalation, and frankly, a global norm breakdown occurring with information as that nucleus. When states weaponize information, other states respond in kind. Verification regimes fray. The remedy is multilateral confidence building, joint fact-finding missions, shared forensic standards, and treaty-like norms that makes deception costly. If I take a drink, I won't stutter. It is important for you to understand these dilemmas are not hypothetical. They are patterns driven by incentives. Small acts of compromise become institutional habits. The promise of short-term gains erodes long-term norms. The human costs are real. Wrongful detention, destroyed careers, damaged alliances, and a public sphere where verification gives way to contestation. I want to be explicit and blunt, because here, this is where rhetoric becomes real harm. In the more recent past, we have seen political leaders, domestically and abroad, cherry-pick bits of information, remove context, and then weaponize those snippets to attack opponents, or in this country, discredit career civil servants. This is not a partisan critique. This is an abuse of trust. It prevents the purpose of intelligence. Excuse me, it perverts the purpose of intelligence. Much different sentence. The integrity of intelligence is a covenant, a promise that those entrusted with sensitive information will present it honestly, with all relevant caveats and uncertainty. When the promise is broken, that is, when intelligence is used as a political weapon, the entire foundation of security is undermined. Institutional credibility erodes. Analysts shrink from offering candid judgments, and alliances fracture because partners fear exposure or manipulation. We must say this plainly and make it central to our public ethic. Using intelligence selectively to score political points destroys credibility, makes honored advice dangerous to give, and invites retaliation that corrodes the broader security architecture. Protecting collectors and analysts, insulating assessments from political editing, and ensuring real consequences when intelligence is manipulated are not optional niceties. They are essential repairs to a broken trust contract. Pause and imagine the practical consequence of an analyst or a collector seeing the way their carefully worded uncertainty was clipped into a blunt claim. They will hesitate next time to surface inconvenient intelligence. A source or collaborative government abroad seeing their sensitive information provided under covenant of trust, shared out of context, will refuse to provide further information. That hesitation is not abstract. It's measurable in lost opportunities to prevent harm. We really live in a time where speaking truth to power is a dangerous endeavor. It brings me to the human side of the equation. Let me tell you about people. Because policy sounds cleaner when it's abstract. I sat with colleagues, quietly, careful professionals, whose work was dismissed because it did not fit a preferred narrative. I've personally been accused of a heinous crime because of a confirmatory bias by the investigators. During that Robert Hansen investigation, I was removed from my position, endured many months of investigation by the FBI, and watched my career melt before my eyes. I recovered. Others didn't. When we lack critical thinking and allow those with a preferred narrative to prevail, we are asking for more of the same. I've watched too many capable careers sidetracked by political theater and reputations shredded by selective leaks and false accusations. Those are individual tragedies, but the ripple effects are institutional. When credibility is lost, allies become cautious and sources dry up. They reduce sharing, compartmentalize information, demand bilateral safeguards, and slow the urgent exchanges. This creates vulnerabilities in its own right. Make no mistake, our adversaries are exploiting this vacuum. Our adversaries do not sleep. Our adversaries play the long game. Those of you who will hear the class lecture will understand what I mean by the long game in more detail. Domestic institutions become less effective because the internal culture shifts towards self-protection and alignment rather than truth-seeking and service. The moral damage is also generational. Individuals who are contemplating entering public service watch how truth is treated. If honesty is punished and pliancy is rewarded, we will cultivate an entirely different class of professionals, adept at performance, indifferent to integrity. That is why protecting the integrity of intelligence is not only a functional need, it's an act of institutional parenting. We owe future generations the structures and habits that make principled service possible. Your education is not just about accumulating knowledge. It's about being entrusted with the responsibility to use that knowledge for the greater good. You are being prepared not just for a career, but to be a steward of truth in your community and in the world. It is the core of what you do here at King University, and it's a powerful legacy. Yet there's another axis to this argument, the practical superiority of collaborative approaches. Epistemic advantage. Bringing multiple independent perspectives to bear reduces single source error and creates corroborated narratives that survive scrutiny. You all can do that. Relational advantages. Long-term partnerships between agencies, foreign services, and with local community create resilient networks. Those networks continue to function through personnel changes and political churn. Operational advantage. Shared verification mechanisms and joint oversight make intelligence more shareable. When methods are lawful, audible, allies are willing to cooperate and confidence grows. Moral advantage. Treating human beings as partners rather than objects preserves dignity and builds legitimacy. The legitimacy is a strategic resource. A story to illustrate. I was once out on a mission. There was no running water. And was working with a community appropriately skeptical of outsiders. They had been promised help and then abandoned. We took a different approach. We built consistent presence. We listened more than we spoke. We honored constraints. Over months, a reliable flow of information emerged, information that saved lives. Coercion might have produced speed. Partnership produced durability. Institutions must institutionalize these lessons and change performance metrics to reward validated, shareable outcomes. Rewards success, not sycophantic narratives. Create protected platforms for sharing human intelligence. Reframe incentives so that the long-term trust is more valuable than short-term scoops. Reforms are not merely abstract ideals. They are practical measures we can implement now. Let me share some on both the institution and individual level. I see both as desirable and possible. Institutional first. Analytical independence as a safeguard. Create analytical review boards. Insulate from political offices. Codify protections for dissenting reports. And require public documentation when assessments are materially altered for policymaker use. That's apolitical. External oversight and transparency. Expand independent auditing authorities with real subpoena power. Mandate declassification review timelines to reduce the politics of perpetual secrecy. Legal and procedural red lines. Codify prohibitions against using intelligence for domestic partisan ends. Set statutory penalties for abuse of disclosures and misuse. Make sure you have collaborative architects. Invest in joint verification centers with allies. Standardize forensics and formal mechanisms for shared fact-finding. Have algorithmic accountability. Require model cards, audit trails, and human-in-the-loop checkpoints. Automated decision systems used in law enforcement, national security, or in the immigration context. On the individual and the cultural side, teach and practice stewardship. Embed stewardship as a core competency. Training that emphasizes the moral dimensions of secrecy and the obligations of care. Reward integrity. Align promotion and reward structures to value rigorous, validated work rather than media-friendly shortcuts. Create safe dissent channels. Institutionalize protected pathways for individuals. Raise concerns without career risk. Equip inspectors general and ombuds offices with real independence. Civic literacy and public engagement help the public understand how to read assessments, what uncertainty means, and why analytic caveats are a feature, not a flaw. Rare in this world do we know something 100%. I'm standing before you. We can all attest to that. But where was I before I walked through the room? We'll talk about that. Some of you know and some of you don't. Some of you might opine. These are modest but concrete changes. They require political will, but they are not impossible. They demand consistent civic pressure and the sustained institutional attention. You know, every one of you can be a truth keeper. You do not need a security clearance to defend the integrity of knowledge. In fact, the health of our public epistemic environment depends on the broad civic participation. I believe that every one of you, regardless of your chosen field of study, has the potential to be a truth keeper, to stand against the tides of disinformation and to ensure that clarity prevails. Journalists must insist on context, not sound bites. Scholars must push for methodological transparency. Community leaders must model ethical handling of information, and citizens must reward institutions that demonstrate integrity and hold accountable those who do not. Every time a citizen, a reporter, or elected official calls out cherry picking, they strengthen the norms and protect honest analysis. This is not merely altruism. It is both an ethical and moral imperative and a practical self-defense against a world where disinformation, once normalized, becomes costly for everyone. In this sense, I'm neck deep in the preservation of truth, working to restore signals from Bristol to Beijing. I focus my efforts on tools and frameworks that help preserve and restore truth. I call this work weaponized awareness, or the cartography of truth, if you will. I'm working with others in forming the civic AI canon and creating the means to clear the fog, to preserve semantic memory, and to ensure signals of truth can be heard, even amidst the loudest static or the smoke screen of untruths. It's a modern application of the ancient principle: the truth shall set you free. These tools we are designing are to provide a compass in a real world without clear maps. They help us discern what is real from what is fabricated. In this regard, I'm working on a manuscript. It's almost finished. I'm working on the artwork now. The Truth Traveler's Compass, sorting donkey dust from gold dust in the age of AI, which I pray will serve as a launching point to educate all from K to 12 and beyond. I began by acknowledging this locale as a sacred space, a place of reflection and a moral reckoning. I want to challenge you to carry this spirit with you when you leave here today. You do not need a security clearance to guard the truth. You need courage to choose it. You need a commitment to act ethically, even when no one is watching. Your ethical framework is shaped when no one's grading you. Only your conscience is. Whether you're in a quiet room or in a public forum, remember that your actions have consequences, that your integrity is your most valuable asset. If intelligence is to remain a public good rather than a political cudgel, each of us must accept a duty. Call out cherry picking, defend career professionals who provide inconvenient truths, and insist on institutional protections that make manipulation costly and transparent. These are not optional. These are not dilemmas. These are the repair work of democratic institutions. This university is your launch pad, not just for your careers, but for character. May your legacy be one of stewardship, integrity, and grace. May you choose the hard right over the easier applause. And may you, in your own sphere, be a truth keeper. Thank you very much.